Hello everybody
Hello, hello.
and welcome to, I think it's our 6th webinar of the summer school, and this week you got me again hosting and Cliff this time is having a break, having a holiday, and I'd like to welcome our wonderful team member of New Energy Work, Basti.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Some of you may remember me from Wednesday classes. And in fact, if anyone is going to be coming to the Wednesday class, then I'll be there tomorrow.
Yes.
But today is about the Dao and the Dao in our Shiatsu practice.
So I'd just like to add in quick, yes, please say hi in the chat. I'll also be checking the chat. So the joy of that is if you've got any questions or experiences, I can relay it straight back to Basti in the room and we can get proper live feedback from that. I've also put in the chat that we've been tested and double jabbed. So this is all safe area for us to work. And yeah, I guess without further ado, Basti, I'll hand over to you. Knowledgeable man on the Tao. Didn't you find it when you were about 12? A book somewhere?
Yes, so I'd had a bit of difficulty when I was younger. My dad had actually died when I was very young. And when I was about 12 or 13, I found this book up in my mum and dad's bedroom. And I didn't know what it was about. It had a funny name, but the more I read it, the more it just seemed to allow a certain sense of peace and calm and a sort of an understanding to it. It was so beautifully simple as well. And that was the Dao De Ching. And if you haven't heard of the Dao De Ching, it is sort of the first and most important, in a way, or seminal text on Taoism, written something like 2,500 years ago.
Like all great books are.
Yeah, like all great books. It was written a while ago and it's great. That stuck with me ever since. I've always had a copy nearby.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. And I guess in some way, because you've been practicing Shiatsu for so long as well, which is amazing. Can you believe it? 17 years? I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, in a good way.
Yeah.
It's great.
No, it's been lovely. Yeah, I started learning Shiatsu in 2004, so I was 23, and I have always found the more I've kind of gone through Shiatsu practice, the more I have kind of gone, about things from the Dao De Ching and Taoist sort of concepts, because it is behind all of Chinese medicine. In fact, if you go to the earliest book on Chinese medicine, which sort of most voluminous book on Chinese medicine, which is the Yellow Emperor's Classics on Chinese Medicine, or the Neijing Suwen, then that always references back to the Dao De Ching. So that's lovely. It's always going back to that. And so that underpins loads of what we do, in a sense. And I've always sort of had that sort of, yes, whenever we've been practicing with different things and learning. Yeah. So I've really enjoyed the journey so far.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more, Basti.
Okay, well, we shall see what we shall see.
Great.
Okay. And as Kat said, if you have anything you want to share or you want to ask as it goes along, then do, and I'll see if we can just jump straight into it. And if not, I'll try and make some time at the end for some questions and things like that. This will have some practical things going on. In essence, and I'll come back to this in a moment, I don't really know what's going to happen or what I'm going to say. So, we shall see. But I'll throw in some sort of exercises and practices for ourselves, and there will also be something that we can do that is applicable to our Shiatsu practice. And I'm going to borrow Kat to be a body to play with this sort of way of playing with it.
Lovely.
So yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Basti. I shall scoot out the way. Keep
Okay.
an eye on the chat, and please call me back, or I'll give you some questions or anything like that as we go. And hello, everybody who's just joined.
Yes, hello. Okay, so it would be, as we often do, great to start with a poll, and I have got a poll set up. If you could, please, Kat.
Excuse me, I'm like right in the corner.
So that's the one.
This one.
That's the one, yes. So this is a poll just asking you, how much do you know about the Tao? And you can see there it's written both with a D and with a T, and that's partly to do with Chinese translation. So here we go. Do you know nothing at all, or a little bit? Do you know plenty about the Tao? And I have studied extensively and fastidiously, and it doesn't seem that anyone seems to have clicked that. Interesting to see. Neither have I. So we'll see what happens. Okay, most people know they know a little bit. How much is that? 67%. It's a good amount. They know a little bit. There's a few people, 20% almost, know nothing. That's interesting. So I will give a little bit of an explanation about some things. In some ways, when I was preparing for this, I thought to myself, or I realized, oh, this is going to be a really, really, really short webinar, or it's going to last forever, because the Tao almost cannot be explained. Well, really, it cannot fully be explained. And I'll go into this for a moment. Before I do, I just wanted to say the word Tao is basically translated as road or path or way, or you could even say street. And funnily enough, just as an aside, I actually just found out the other day, this is really funny, the word in Sanskrit for road or path is Basti.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I know. Couldn't believe it. And so, what was I going to say? Oh, yes. The word Tao translates as road or path, but it is an unending path. And it is the path of everything. So it's the path of all of life coming into being, expressing itself as it is, and then when it's done doing that, it returns back to non-being, to not being anything, nothingness. And this is the way, this is the Tao. And so everything, in a sort of nutshell, everything is this coming into being, expressing itself as it is, and then simply returning to nothingness. So there's the really, there we go, webinar's over. So if you practice Shiatsu, the Tao is already in your practice, because your practice is part of everything that is. So that's one way why this webinar could be like done in a second. The other way, where it lasts forever, is the fact that the book, the Dao De Ching, that I mentioned earlier, it's beautiful in that it starts with an opening line that almost cancels the whole book out. I'll try not to go on. I have a tendency to talk and go on about things because I just find things very interesting and I go off on a tangent. So the story goes that the writer of the Dao De Ching, Lao Tzu, was this enlightened sage of China, one of the most intellectual people in China, but was sick to the heart of the ways of men and society. So was going to leave to become a hermit in the mountains. On his way out of the land where he was living, there was a student of the Tao who recognized him at the frontier, the edge of the city. And he pleaded with him to write down his understanding of the Tao for posterity. And so duly, Lao Tzu gave the book that he then wrote, supposedly, to this student to be kept. And that is the Dao De Ching. And the great thing is, a book of 81 chapters and however many words, thousands of words, the opening line is the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. And the name that can be named is not the eternal name. So we could spend the rest of our lives explaining and describing and pondering, and it'll never cover it. It'll only ever be like fingers pointing towards the moon. It will never be the experience of observing the moon, to put it in another way. So we'll try not to get caught up in either of those two, like the webinar's finished now, or this is going to go on forever. We're just going to play with something in between. With this sense of the Tao, everything is just, like I was saying earlier, everything is just as it is. So I would like to ask you to just take a moment to sort of come back to yourselves. And we're going to do this just through the breath. So I'm just going to sit forwards a second. So get yourself into a comfy position. Hopefully it won't go on for too long. But we're just going to spend a few minutes doing some breathing. So whether you're sitting or whether you're standing or whether you would like to lie down, get yourself into the position. Okay. And I would like you to just pay attention to your breathing, but just let yourself breathe. We're not going to make anything happen. We're just going to allow our breathing to be as it is and to notice it. So just listen, feel, observe. So I'm going to let you know what's going on with my breath, but I want you to really pay attention with yours. But I'm noticing that most of my breath is in the upper body, and I have a little bit of tightness across my diaphragm and ribs. It's probably nervousness, to be fair. And we're not going to do anything with however our breath is. We're just going to notice it. Keep noticing it. Not too intently. Don't be too intense. Just be with your breath. And get a sense of being aware from inside of your body, almost like inside of your center. And that can be however you wish it to be. So just resting in your center, observing your breath from within that place, within that space. Just noticing whether the body is feeling tense or relaxing anywhere else. Noticing whether the breath is changing at all just by being in your center, whatever you feel that to be, inside of yourself somehow, somewhere. And just watching the breath. What's it like? Just let it be as it is. It can be very tempting to breathe in some way because we know this breathing can make something happen, you know. But we don't need to do that for now. Just breathing. And then maybe after a while something needs to happen. Like maybe a sigh or something similar. Maybe not. just noticing how you are in your body, in the space you're in at the moment, with your breath, and just kind of landing there. Okay, so that's literally just all we're doing for now. I'm going to let that go for a moment, but I'm going to come back to that idea of a center in a bit. I just wanted us to kind of just get a sense of that way of not having to do anything, just kind of allowing things to be. Yeah, I'm feeling a little more settled in myself, I have to admit. And I also wanted to say that I had a load of slides set up. I had a really lovely copy of the Dao De Ching I was going to bring along. And because I've been very tired recently and I was busy earlier on today, I forgot it all. And as I was coming into Norwich to come and do this webinar, I realized I'd left it behind. And at first I was going to get all, oh no, how silly, and get all annoyed with myself until I realized, oh yeah, this is just how it's going. This is just another expression of how, life is at the moment. And that's totally fine. I just kind of laughed it off after that. It's like, this is just the perfect expression of how things are. Just got to go with it. So there's an expression of how you can approach things with an idea of the Tao. I was going to do something then. There's an exercise I was going to do. Oh, yes. So, no, not a poll yet, but we're going to do a poll later. We're going to do a poll just before we go into the practice with another body. But we'll come back to that in a bit. So I would like you to get a sense of the center, because there's a lovely quote from the Dao De Ching. And with lots of our Qigong backgrounds, and when we come to practice in Shiatsu, it can be very useful to have a sense of the center. So I'd like you to just try something now. And you can do this kneeling down, possibly even sitting, or you can do it standing up. So I think I might do this standing up. It might be a little easier. So
I'll just move the camera for Basti.
Yeah? Okay, so we're just going to move the camera up a little bit. There we go. So have your feet about hip to shoulder width apart and basically facing forwards. And let your ankles, your knees and your hips just soften and let yourself kind of sink towards the floor a little. Okay. Soft in the front of the hips. Allow your pelvis to relax as if your sacrum is nice and heavy and sinking towards the ground. And just feel the ground underneath your feet. There is the earth. There are you standing on the earth. Okay. Now bring your attention to the top of your head and that sense of the space above the top of your head. And feel your crown gently lifted towards the heavens. And gently let your chin tuck in slightly. You're not pushing in, you're not doing that. It's almost like you're just allowing it to tuck in slightly. Up, in, relax. Pardon me. Whenever I set this alignment up, it always makes my digestion get going. So if I burp, I apologize. Okay. So I want you to hold your hands in front of you as if about hip width you're holding a ball. And before we get moving, just come to that sense of your alignment. Head floating, sacrum sinking. And your spine just hanging down in the center. Come to a sense of feeling in the middle, in the center of your body. Now this, if you wish, you can imagine as your central channel, you can imagine as the line on which your dantians sit along, or a Hara line, if you know that. It's just a central space. And we're just going to be turning on this central space. So we're not going to be going over like this, just staying in the middle. Staying in the middle. And the turn comes from the hips. So the knees aren't turning. Knees are staying above the feet. Hips are turning. You're just softening and softening. Okay. And that's just going to turn. And allow your arms to kind of like turn out. So when you turn one way, the arm turns out. When you turn the other way, the other arm turns out. See? Nice and simple. So we're working from a center, a space. Now, some people who have done some martial arts will recognize this sort of movement. There's a lot, essentially like a kind of a block here, but that's okay. We're not really having to go into that right now. What we want to focus on is the center. And now I'm going to change this slightly. We're going to go from here up to the opposite side, and then turn, and then back down again, and turn. Opposite side the above, and turn. Opposite side below, and turn. And you can make this as smooth as you like. Or you can make it more staccato if you want to. And if anyone knows cloud hands, then you can make it more fluid in this way. It's up to you. What I would like you to do, though, is get that sense of your center. Running down inside of yourself. No particular space. Just inside a center. And get a feeling of that. So it's almost like your legs are grounded. You're turning from the hips. The body is the movement. The arms express that movement freely, not having to do anything with it really much. It's just happening. You're staying in your center. And that's quite nice to just be there. I'm going to quote from chapter 11 in the Dao De Ching. 30 spokes has the wheel, but it is the hole in the hub of the wheel that makes it useful. We carve a bowl and we have sides that lift, but it is the empty space inside that makes it useful. We make a room and we build doors and windows, but it is the empty space within that makes it useful. Thus, it is in having something that we can have profit, but it is having nothing that makes it useful. And it's that having nothing, having that space, having that emptiness, is having that center within. So allow your arms to just relax. Keep turning on that center. Have that sense of an emptiness inside. No particular space. You're just able to relax. You can let your movement stop. And just be in the emptiness of your center. Okay. And if you want to, you can have a little jiggle around. And let us know how you got on with that. Maybe you didn't like it. Maybe you found it a bit strange. I'd be happy to hear. So that idea of there being there's being somethings and there's being nothing is one of the kind of primary things about Taoism. And it really underpins almost the entire sort of sense of how Chinese thought, and therefore going into sort of practices like Chinese medicine, and therefore onwards from that, Shiatsu, which took some of the marks from Chinese medicine. It really underpins everything, having something and having nothing. But what's really key with that is that there's no emphasis on one being better than the other. So, for instance, you can say we have manifestation of the world, what sometimes is often called the 10,000 things. But then we have the mystery, the the thing that you cannot grasp by hands, you cannot know by writing down. And so often we, especially in the West, want to go, oh, we've been brought up being told this, that, and the other. And so we kind of want the mystery more. Because we've got the manifestations and we can really play with that, but sometimes we want the mystery more. Actually, they're both part and parcel of everything. And so if we're talking about, for instance, and this comes into when we talk about duality in life, the Taoist sort of precept is not even bothering to go into duality. It's just like, well, everything's already there. However, we do, as a sort of group of people, like to label things and work things out and play with them in certain ways. And so that's absolutely fine. So let's do that for a bit. And I'm going to go into some of the kind of like Chinese cosmology. And I'm not like an expert. I just want to put my hands up and say that. I'm not an expert. But as it sort of stands, there is the Tao, the sort of like before everything, beyond everything, no edges, no sides. Yeah, scratching the head. That's kind of it. And then there's something that is called Wuji. I'll be interested to hear if anyone who's here knows anything more or anything else to add to this about Wuji. But you could say, in a sense, Wuji is another term for the Tao. But you could also say that Wuji, not Wu Qi, but Wuji is the undifferentiated sort of everything. The kind of like primordial soup that is not even a soup. It's just sort of if you were to talk about Qi being completely undifferentiated, everything, but everything as nothing in particular. That's kind of a funny concept for us most of the time. Then we go into a quality that is talked about as Taiji. Now we all know Tai Chi as in like the form of martial arts, or some people would prefer to look at it as a form of Qigong. And that's fine, that's great. Tai Chi took its name from this concept, Tai Chi. Many martial arts and practices have taken their names from great understandings. So for instance, Bagua is another martial art that some may know about. And Bagua are the lines of changes that are known in the I Ching as to how Yin and Yang appear in different forms within the world and how they change and move on from one to another. I won't go into that. but there's just a little, description. So Tai Chi, what are we talking about with this? Well, when we see the symbol that we call the Yin Yang symbol, with its little dots of white and black within the black and white, then we sort of say, oh, that's the Yin Yang symbol. But in a sense, it's not the Yin and Yang symbol, it is the symbol of Tai Chi. And this is everything together in its various ways, but as a whole, as a wonderfully, perfectly balanced whole. If we're actually talking about this is yin and this is yang, well, then we've broken it down. Then we've broken it down into this and that. Then we're getting into that sense of duality and we're getting into other things. That's when we start getting into the 10,000 things. But before that stage, when everything is still as a whole, and yet it has its varying qualities, well, then this is Tai Chi. So, the unending change of being is another way of putting it, you could say. So then from that, you have the 10,000 things. This is the myriad manifestations, the stuff of life that we tend to look at. What have we got written here? Jane says, which chapter or section was that quote from? Which quote was that?
I think, because she said that made me smile and she really enjoyed it. I think it was the one about the bowl having a space and the room having a space.
Yeah, so when we were doing the exercise, it's chapter 11 from the Dao De Ching. And the Dao De Ching is, it's the second most commented on book ever written and has been translated more times than I can remember. So you will find wonderfully different translations, because Chinese to English does not go very directly, which is kind of makes it quite fun in a way. So where was I? Where was I going? Oh yes, we have the Dao, and then Wuji, and then Taiji, and then we have the 10,000 things, and then we start to play with them in patterns. So we have the yin and yang, and we have the 5 elements. Okay, so now we're getting into sort of like ground that we really know about, things that we really have learned and played with a lot. And I'm not going to go into the 5 elements. I'm sure pretty much everyone who's here knows something about them, but I am going to stick with yin and yang for a moment. And yin and yang, as we all know, yin is the sort of the deeper, the more feminine, the more dark, and the turning in. Yang, the more warming, the more masculine, the more light and outward, those sorts of things. And so we tend to work with them in these ways, as recognizing a certain quality and continuing with, or finding its sort of movement, its way, its passage, or its need in our practices. It's what we tend to do. So I would like us to work in a certain way which fits in with what we in Shiatsu work with as Kyo and Jitsu. And of course, when Matsunaga was developing his work, he was really working with, and he said quite clearly, this is Kyo, this is Yin and Yang. So the Kyo is the Yin, and the Jitsu is the Yang. So we're going to go now into this sense of Kyo and Jitsu as a sense of Yin and Yang, and we're going to work with it in a way where maybe it will come back to another sense of working with it that maybe we don't always do, or maybe you do work with it in this way in Shiatsu. Before we do, though, I would like to just run a poll, if you could please.
Yes.
Over to my wonderful assistant, Kat.
In the corner, yes.
So,
This one?
yes. Do you use Kyo and Jitsu in your practice? So most people here, I'm sure, have some kind of Shiatsu practice. So I've put yes, no, and maybe for the people who aren't sure. That's absolutely fine. So at the moment we've got one answer of someone saying no, one answer of someone saying maybe, and everyone else so far has said yes. Great. That is brilliant. And we'll let that run on. That's just to get a good idea of it. So this is going to be slightly different in some ways to how we normally work with it in Shiatsu. But we're going to do something with ourselves first, and then I'm going to get Kat to get involved. Before I do, I would just like to, if I can remember it, give the first chapter of the Dao De Ching, because it's going to give us a frame of reference to come back to. So the first chapter from the Dao De Ching is, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, and the name that can be named is not the eternal name. Naming comes from desire. The nameless comes with no desire or without desire. Ever desiring, one will see the manifestations. Ever desireless, one will see the mystery. But these two things come from the same source. This is called darkness, a darkness within darkness, which is the gateway to all understanding. And now I'd just like to say for a moment that when I say darkness from this quote, then we often in the West say light has some kind of good and dark has some kind of bad. But it doesn't necessarily need to be like this. And really at its heart, they are just differing qualities. And in Chinese thought, the darkness also has this sense of profound about it. And so it's a bit like when you're standing out at night, the amount that you can see is almost nothing compared to what is out there to see. Someone, Bridget, has just said, I feel very protected in the dark. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I do too. I never used to be. I used to be very scared of the dark when I was younger. And I've come to appreciate it a lot more. And there can be a great profundity in being in the dark. And mystery lies therein. And sometimes when we allow mystery to be there, even if we don't get it, that's kind of great, you know? It gives us a chance to go, yeah, I don't have to know everything. Okay, so with that, Linda says, do you have a preferred translation of the Dao De Ching? We'll come back to that in a bit. Hopefully we'll get time. I need to crack on in order to be able to give you all time. So
I marked it as a question so we don't forget.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to go through something fairly briefly with me about the Kyo and Jitsu and about coming back to a quality of not needing to be either or. And then we're going to see if we can apply this in a practice. So close your eyes for a moment. If you are sitting or standing, matters not, and just take your attention inwards. And if you want to, just scan through yourself, or notice if your attention is drawn into a certain area where you have some tension or fullness or discomfort, something that's really calling you. I have a very strong point over in my shoulder blade, which is going to be tricky to get to, but I'll reach there somehow. And I'd like you to take one of your hands, or if you can't reach it with your hand, just take your attention your mind into that area and contact it. So I'm going to try and reach over to my shoulder blade. You don't have to reach your shoulder blade. I want you to go to where you are feeling this obvious thing. Now this is the Jitsu. This is the Yang. This is the thing that's saying, look at me. And I want you to just not do anything with it, except like we were with the breath, just notice it, just be with it, just kind of almost hear it for a moment. Allow it to be as it is. There it is. Some kind of a discomfort, some kind of a something. Now here's one of the interesting parts. Ask the area at which you are contacting, that you are in touch with, where is its hidden need? Where is its kyo? Where is its yin? Take your attention to that sense of where is your hidden need, and follow to where that is. You don't have to know what the quality is like yet. I'm feeling it just over here underneath my ribs, like a kind of a quiet softness. You don't have to know what it's like, just finding where it is. And again, if you can't reach it, try to bring your mind to that area. Now your focus is going to be sort of almost dropping some ki, projecting ki, or filling, or generally giving what it is needing to this area. So the focus is now the area of the need, of the hidden need. And if you feel comfortable doing it, you can use both hands to project through to this area. And occasionally just checking back in, noticing whether the Jitsu area is changing at all. I'm feeling mine start to soften. That's great. Phew. Just connect back in with that kyo, that area of need, and just stay with that for a moment. And now start to notice we're not needing to have one being more important than the other. Allow your attention to gently move from the kyo to the Jitsu and back, until it's almost setting up a circle, a circuit of moving from one to the other. Your attention, your energy is almost moving in a circuit, and it is encompassing and is fed by both the Jitsu area and your kyo area. The manifestation and the mystery. And allow this to have its own quality, its own energy. This whole circuit has its own energy, as it has its own source. And allow that to just move through both areas and through the whole of your body. Not doing anything with it, just letting it be. Okay, and then just letting your hands relax. Just taking one last moment to check in with yourself, brief scan, or just check in with those two areas and see if they're any different. And maybe let us know in the chat if they do feel any different or not. Maybe they don't. Be interesting to find out. I'm going to move straight on to doing this in a practical setting with Kat. If that's right with you,
Yes.
please, Kat. And feel free to put in questions in the chat whilst we're doing this. I'll try to keep it brief. So Jane said, yes, my neck pain has diminished. Hurrah, that's lovely to know. The neck pain was probably something in the neck wanting to be painful for some reason. So yeah, here we go. Yeah, feel free to keep commenting, everyone. We'll come back to this in a moment.
Lying down, how would you?
Lying down, head at either end, facing up.
Facing up.
Yeah. Would you like a cushion at all?
Nope, that's perfect.
Okay. So I'm just going to connect in with Kat's Hara. However, Kat, do you have an area that you are fully aware of, or would you like me to just see what comes up?
There was one when I was sat in the corner doing it, watching the chat, but it's kind of upper spine. It kind of feels like it needs a good whack.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like, you know, when something just gets caught and the breath just goes, eep.
Yes.
Yeah, it needs a little shift. It did ease quite a bit just now, which was lovely.
Brilliant.
But it's still a little bit there.
Maybe we'll just come back to that. That could just be the easiest thing. Okay, so connection, our alignment, and a connection with the receiver. And this can be done in the middle of a session at any point. This is not a sort of needs to be done at any time in particular. Okay, so yeah, I get a sense of that upper back and a bit of that sort of almost compaction quality. Okay, I'm going to come round up above Kat.
Keep enough space.
Yes, plenty of space. Can you use it? Yes. So I'm just going to slide my hand under her shoulder to the upper back, just to kind of feel into the area.
Yes, that's it. Right there.
Okay, lovely. So then I'm still going to have this sense of asking, almost like putting the question in to the area. Now that I'm getting a feeling for it, this is what it's like. Where is your hidden need? And it may be different as to where Kat found it for when I'm exploring this, because just like whenever you come to a Shiatsu client, your chi interacting with their chi will potentially create a different outcome as to what can be found. However, where is your hidden need? Okay, so I want to work over on this shoulder, so I'm just going to swap hands a second. Make sure I get this quality. Yeah. And still coming through to this. So I'm working over on the opposite shoulder now. And I am finding that same point that was the hidden need, the Kyo quality. And I'm not trying to, I don't want to try and change it. But what I would like is to almost sort of sink into it and recognize it, if that makes sense. To be with it and so there's a need there and you're just going, yeah, I feel that need. I hear you, in a sense, but with your touch. And if you want to, you can project some ki, so then we can sink in and project a bit of ki. There, and I'm noticing the upper back just soften a little bit. And I'm going to use both hands. So one hand is in the upper back, in the area which is Jitsu. And I'm going to project ki through that hand to the area that is Kyo, as well as using the other hand that is now meeting the Kyo area directly. How's that going?
It's brilliant. I can feel it easing.
Lovely.
It's kind of funny because I thought it needed a whack, but actually it feels more like butter melting.
Oh. How's it on the other side of the spine? A bit of tension there. So then we can do that quality of letting both areas become part of the same sort of quality within them. So neither is better, neither has more emphasis. And we're allowing almost, because we're taking our attention from one to the other, we're almost allowing this circuit of ki to build up, this oneness. So if the jitsu is the yang and the kyo is the yin, then you have the yin and the yang together, and that same ki of togetherness is the Tai Chi that we were talking about earlier. And then we don't have to do anything with it, we're just allowing that to be just a presence within the person, because we all have that. We all have this presence of connection beyond the duality qualities. That just softened a bit more. How's that feeling then?
Much, much better.
Oh, lovely. So I'm just going to literally just leave it there at that.
Thank you, Basti.
That's all right. Looked like nothing was happening really, but there was plenty going on inside. Thank you very much, Kat.
You're very welcome. Yeah, so, much more ease. I feel like I can move, even from this tiny point. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And how did it feel in the contacting of the area and then the contacting from the yin, the kyo aspect?
I think when you first touched the jitsu, the shouty one, it felt like, it was relieved that you'd found it.
Okay.
So it felt, you've acknowledged me, whatever it is. But when you found the one that was empty, and even though you weren't trying to make anything happen, all of a sudden there was like this rush through my body. Like went all through the body, I felt this rush all the way to my feet, and then it kind of came back up the front and started to ease. So I don't know, I felt a lot more wholesome. Yeah, way more wholesome. It's like you found the hole in the wheel, right? And these are all my spokes. It was like reminding me.
Yes.
So some space. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. It really works.
Phew.
Yeah.
Glad that turned out well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
You're
Kat.
welcome.
That's really great. I really appreciate that.
No, it's lovely. Thanks, everyone. I felt very supportive for having me there too.
That's brilliant. And hopefully you can give this a go. I mean, I often use it with myself. If I, for instance, wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, my neck, or whatever, I'll often do this playing with myself. But this is actually a part of my practice all the time now.
Yeah.
And so you'll be working along somewhere and then you're like, oh, this area is really like, it's not releasing on its own, or it's really...
Yeah, and sometimes you want to sedate it and do loads, and you're like, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah.
Let's just listen to it. Let's just find, where is it? There. And then you connect, and then it's allowing it to kind of find its wholesomeness.
That's it. Yeah.
It's the Tai Chi of it.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see what
me over here.
you've written in here. So, great exercise, feeling balanced now, and my hips often been cooled down, jitsu, my neck got warmer, the kyo, fantastic, so lots of lovely stuff going on there. I will answer your question, Linda. do I have a preferred translation of the Dao De Ching? I kind of do. Not that I've read every single translation that's out there. That would be crazy. The one I found when I was 12 or so, and I still have a copy of it. That was the one I was going to bring along today. Is a translation by someone called Gia Fu Feng.
Do you know how to type
Yes,
it? I'll pass the keys.
I'm going to type this in now.
Oh, hang on.
If you could
Pop
click
it
on the
there.
old. Okay, so. Oh, hang on. Gia Fu Feng. And he has done a couple of books with an amazing photographer called Jane English. I'll write her name in as well. And so Gia Fu Feng did the translation. Jane English did these beautiful photographs, and they've done the Dao De Ching by Lao Tzu, and they've also done the inner chapters of Chuang Tzu by Chuang Tzu. If you know about that book, that's a great one. That's a lovely one. There's also a great translation, which is also slightly more interpreted by someone called Stephen Mitchell. Might be two L's. I'm going to put it in like that. Stephen Mitchell, who is a Canadian guy who he has done many years of Zen training. And so some of his Zen training, he understood where the original Zen came from. Just to give you a really brief, I know time's getting long, give you a really brief kind of like run back. So Zen Buddhism is a sect of Buddhism that we know. Zen is the word from Japan. However, that originated more so from China, where it was called Chan Buddhism. And that was developed out of one of the ways, I could be mistaken here, so please correct me if I am incorrect. That mainly developed out of Taoists meeting Buddhism, and there being a particular way of learning and being taught and understanding that came from the Sanskrit word dhyana. And there are several ways that were generally kind of taught, but the mainly sort of like the direct transmission and the knowing by being and sort of direct experience understanding. And so often is called the mind experience, was dhyana, and that then in Chinese became Chan, and then that later in Japanese became Zen. So the Taoists, when they met this way of going about it, they were like, oh yeah, no, I get that direct being understanding, because if nothing else, Karen has just said that's the one that she uses. It's beautiful. Yeah, he's like a poet, and he refers back to so the way that he ended up translating it was he refers back to some poets and some early translations of Taoism in English, so then he could really play with it as he went along. So yes, the one of the things about Taoism is that it is, if nothing else, incredibly practical and very simple. So when something comes along that is just like, I'm not going to give you loads of information about it, we're just going to get on with it, then the Taoist sort of approach is like, okay, that's fine by me, you know? So for instance, the Indian background, where you have the pundits of Hinduism writing beautiful but enormous tome and book after book on the various ways and practices and directions and gods and things like this. And believe me, I'm not knocking Hinduism at all. It is such an incredibly beautiful and ornate approach to life and being and non-being. But the Taoists just sort of didn't really bother with writing big books. They just kind of went, I probably won't write anything. And if I am going to write something, it'll be really small. So it's supremely simple and practical and just about giving it a go. And so that's the main thing that I've learned from it, that I've applied in my life, is just being, it is as it is. Try not to force anything, and simple, practical, and receptive. In fact, Stephen Mitchell described Taoism as being possibly the most feminine of all sort of religio-theosophical, philosophical practices. So, Rachel, you've put, thank you. Bravo, Basti, a fascinating and enlightening evening, and all the better for being extemporary because you have left your books at home.
Very Tao.
Yeah, very Tao. In fact, the book I was going to show you, this is the last thing I'll say because we're already past our hour length. The last thing I'll say is the book that I was going to show you was a paperback, and it fell apart because of being very old and getting damp at one point. And I found a bookbinder to fix it. And she fixed the book, and it was handed back to me, and I was so pleased and so happy. And I started flicking through, and then found that some of the pages towards the end were back to front. So it kind of gets to about chapter 62, and then it goes to chapter 74, and then goes backwards until it gets back to chapter 63, or something like that. And at first I was sort of, again, just like in the journey here, I was a bit like, oh no, I'm going to have to take this back to the bookbinder and get it redone. And then I just realized, oh, hang on, this is a book on Taoism. And it's just thrown me another curveball of this is just a bit back to front sometimes. Are you going to get on with it? And it was like, yeah, of course.
Oh.
It's like a really nice kind of lesson of just accepting some things just come as they are. And is it really important or is it not really important?
Yes.
Which in Taoism, you've got the Husoe and Yosoe. Is it really important or is it not really important?
Oh, that's lovely.
On that note, thank you very much for attending, everyone.
I'll come and wiggle back in and say
Yes.
Thank you, Basti. And I think somewhere I have a little slide. I think it's this one.
Oh.
So this was Basti for this week. And what I want to show is that we've got the wonderful Cindy Engel. I think you're here watching the webinar. She's going to be here next week in the penultimate webinar of the summer school. And we should have Cliff back when he's off break. And then the final webinar of the summer school is going to be Cliff doing a demo. I think Dinah's going to come in and be the body for that one.
Nice.
But yes. We're looking forward to Cindy's webinar next week. So yes, I'm glad you've enjoyed this time with Basti, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.